Hey, it is 12 noon on Wednesday, which means it's time for this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Christman, and this show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. What we do every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time is come to you live to mastermind about the technical side of the real estate industry, to help you understand the technical side of the real estate industry and a topic that comes up all the time. You see it in the house flipping TV shows, anything on HGTV, any show is probably going to mention the word comps. And it's a real thing. Now, it's a lot more in detail than what you usually see in the Hollywood version of this on HGTV and whatnot, but comps are absolutely a real thing. And we're going to talk about demystifying what a comp is, how do you use them, what do you do if you can't find comps, and all of that, because it is an essential part of coming up with value of residential real estate. So that's what we're talking about today, using comps to come up with value. We've got a great show for you today. Stick with us. I'm John Christmo. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
You are watching
Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm John Christmo. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Christmo, and this show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. If you're interested in starting or enhancing your real estate career, make sure you give us a call. The phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. You can also check us out online at tampaschool.com. Again, that's tampaschool.com. And while you're there, make sure you check out our Success Center. Our Success Center is where we help our current students, our past students, as well as our future students plan for their success in the real estate industry. Real estate, there's a lot of information out there, and it could seem overwhelming at any point in your career, whether you're brand new or you've been in real estate for 10 years. It's constantly evolving. There's more information to learn. And our Success Center is where we try to tap into that and help you plan for your success in real estate. So definitely check that out. It's right under the resources on our website, or you just go to tampaschool.com/success. Again, that's tampaschool.com/success. And you'll be able to find the full recording of this episode on our Success Center after the show. But let's get into comps. So first and foremost, what is a comp? Yeah, you know, this word gets tossed around so much in all these different real estate TV shows, and you might hear actual realtors use this word as well, because it is a real word. It's really just a shortened version of the word comparable. So a comp is a comparable. And the better it is that you understand these words, the more it starts to make a little bit more sense to you, and the better it is that you'll know what it is that we're working with here. So when you hear them toss out this word comp in the TV shows and whatnot, I keep going back to that as a reference, but they use these comps to come up with the value of a property. They're using these comps to try to figure out what a property may sell for. They're finding comparable properties that sold. So not just a comparable, it stands for comparable, but really it means a comparable sale. So a comparable sale of another property similar to the property you're trying to find the value for. That's essentially one of the main approaches to coming up with value of property. There's really three different approaches you could use, but the main approach, especially for residential property, is the comparable sale approach for finding what's called market value. And that's what we're going to be dealing with today, market value. And market value is the most probable price a property will bring without any undue stimulus, with each party acting prudently and knowledgeably. And basically, there's a whole definition from Fannie Mae that reads off something like that. But market value, best way to think of this is most probable price. What we're most likely to sell a property for. That's our market value. And that's what we're trying to find using this comparable sales approach. So what we do is we look at the other properties that have sold in a close geographic area. We're going to go over some rules regarding comps in this episode. There's a lot to talk about comps. We'll be spending this whole episode basically talking about them and working through a couple examples as well, so you get an understanding of what it is that you do with them. But you basically want to look within the close vicinity, preferably within the same neighborhood, or if it's not a suburban area where the neighborhoods are very strictly defined. If it's more of an urban area where there's a lot of cross streets and things like that, that's where it gets even more complicated. We'll go into why as we get into more details of this here. But you want to stay in a similar neighborhood. Remember, we're trying to find comparable. Everything we're trying to do is comparable. And in a perfect world, we're able to find a comparable that's identical to our property. In a perfect world, our next door neighbor has an identical property to us, and they just sold their property for this much dollars, and so we should probably sell our property for that much dollars. That's our market value, the most probable price our property would sell for if there's a home right next door to us that's completely identical, same size lot, same size house, even same paint color. That could maybe influence the sale price by about $1,000 or $2,000 depending on the property. So that would be the perfect world, the perfect scenario. Really, the perfect scenario is if there's a whole neighborhood of homes that are exactly the same, they've all sold for the exact same price. That makes our job easy. But it's not a perfect world, and it's not that simple, and it's not that easy. You'll find properties that are similar, that are comparable to the home it is that you're selling, but not identical. And that's why they don't call it identicals. They're not looking for identicals. They're not looking for properties that are identical to the property. They're looking for properties that are comparable to the property. And the property you're trying to find the value for is called the subject property. Now, it's important to know all of these words that we're going over here because we're going to be tossing them around throughout this whole episode. So the subject property, this is the property what we want to find the value of. Our subject property is what we're trying to find the value for. We don't know what that subject property value is. We might have an idea what it is, but we're trying to go through this objective approach to say, okay, based on this data, based on my calculations, based on these comparables, based on this whole report basically you end up compiling out of all this here, I believe that the market value of this subject property is this, but we don't know that going into this. Again, you may have an idea of what you think the value may be. You may think it's worth this much, but now let's go through the comparable sales approach and actually find out if our thinking matches up with what the comparable sales approach actually tells us. So that's important to remember. We don't know what the subject property value is. That's the property we're trying to find the value of, but we are assuming that we don't know the value. And this could be used because where realtors most often are going to use the comparable sales approach and comps and comparative market analysis is when you're dealing with a seller and the seller's wanting to list their property for sale, and you're using the comparable sales in the neighborhood to establish a listing price for the property. And that's where this gets used the most. But where it could also be used is, let's say you're representing a buyer. You're representing a buyer and you're bringing a buyer to a particular property that's already listed, that already has a price. And let's say that that property is priced at $350,000. And our buyer asks us, what do you think the property is really worth? What do you think I should offer on the property? What do you think a fair price would be for this property? What do you think this property will probably sell for? What do you think the market value is? Value is different than price. There's agents out there that won't do any of this stuff, that'll just say, ask the seller, oh, what do you want to list it for? What do you want to sell it for? Okay, we'll get it on the market at that price and see what happens. We might have to drop it down. So the price doesn't indicate what the value of the property actually is, especially an asking price. That could be completely far off than what the true actual value is. Now, in this day and age, there's a lot of automated valuation models that are available. Zillow, the Zestimate, in the Realtor tool panel, you have a system called Realist in there, as well as a few different other ones depending on your board and which ones you have access to. But there's a lot of ways that computers run all of these numbers and come up with the value of the property. And a lot of people, agents included in this, will say, oh, well, that's what the computer says. The computer's obviously smarter than me. It obviously can do math better than me. Or maybe you could do the math better, but why bother when the computer's already doing the math? Now, the reason why these automated valuation models are sometimes flawed, often flawed, is because they're just relying on information that's available in the public records. And the information that's in the public records doesn't have a likelihood to sell or a curb appeal rating or a and I'm just making up terms about this here, or a smell index for inside the property, and all these things that being there in person, we're able to use our professional expertise to say, okay, this property, it's probably going to sell below what the other properties in the neighborhood would sell, what a typical home would sell, maybe because it's in a little bit worse condition. Maybe it looks great on the outside, but the inside is a completely different story. So that's why you want to have an understanding of this, because sometimes you might have to do a little bit of math and a little bit of computation throughout your real estate career going through something like this. And you might prefer to use something like this as opposed to the automated valuation models. But again, you want to know what we're talking about here. So our subject property, that's the home it is that we're trying to find out what it sold for. So let's imagine we've got some street here. And we've got a property here. This is the one we're trying to find the value for. That would be called our subject property. Now what we're going to do, again, that's why I've got the question there, the question mark there, is because we don't know what that subject property value is. And even in that scenario I was giving you, let's say you're working with the buyer and they're saying, what do you think the value of the property is? What do you think it'll likely sell for? What do you think I should offer on the property? And so on and so forth. That could be completely disconnected from the price of the property that it's listed for. And that's why even when there's already a price on there, that's not the value. So again, in this approach, we're assuming that we don't know what the value is of that subject property. But let's say on this same street, we've got two homes, and this is comp number 1, and this is comp number 2, comparable 1 and comparable 2. And there's going to be various aspects about these properties that make them similar or make them different from our subject property. Now, our subject property is essentially going to be our reference point. This is what we're basing everything off of, our subject property. Is this better or worse than our subject property? Is this one better or worse than our subject property? And not just the property as a whole, but individual attributes. Because ideally, these two properties are identical to our subject property. Let's say they're identical and they both sold for $350,000. Therefore, a subject property is obviously worth $350,000. But you don't find properties that are absolutely identical, or even identical in just things that affect the value. Yeah, it might be the paint color is slightly different, and that doesn't really have any major effect, and maybe a very minor, maybe $1,000 or something like that. But those details you typically don't even find. Maybe this property has a pool, whereas your subject property doesn't have a pool. Can we just not use this comparable? Or let's say over here, this one, so we're like, okay, well, we can't use that one, and we can't just look at this and say, okay, well, that one sold for $350,000 because it has the pool. This one doesn't have a pool, so we wouldn't sell for that much. And we're starting to get an understanding here. Okay, this property with a pool is worth more than ours. Let's say this one over here, it's got a 3-car garage, whereas this one only has a 2-car garage. Well, that one's better too. So we know that we're going to be below these ones here. But now what is it that we're going to be doing? And that's called adjustments. So we're going to walk through making adjustments, because this is how you tweak these comparables to make them value-wise identical to our subject property. So that's called adjustments, and that's a big part of the comparable sales approach. And that's why you can't just look at other properties and say, oh, well, this one sold for this much, so mine should sell for this much. Now, if you really understand this comparable approach and you're able to run these numbers in your head extremely quickly, you could do something like that, but that takes years of experience and practice working through stuff like this to be able to do that in your head and just rattle off numbers like that. Most of the time when people say, oh, this home's worth this much money, and that's all, and they're just saying that, They don't have any actual tactileness behind it. So we'll talk about the scientific, mathematical approach to coming up with the value of the property. The computers, basically, the automated valuation models do a version of this, like we're going to be going through today. It gets a little bit more complex in certain respects because they have to go off of the things it is that they don't know, the price of the condition of the home on the inside, the layout of the home even. The layout of the home is something very difficult to quantify where a computer can understand it. So this is, again, where having a person there, having a realtor give you this information is very beneficial. So we're going to go more into the comparable approach. What we've done so far is just kind of establish some of our basics here, what a comparable is, what market value is, what the subject property is, and some of the basics of what we're going to be doing comparing our comparable sales to our subject property. But we're going to take a quick commercial break first. So stick with us. We'll be back in less than 2 minutes. I'm John Kurtzman. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com. Does your current career allow for unlimited income potential? With a career in real estate, the sky is the limit. What you put in is what you get out. Find out more about how you can tap into the unlimited income potential of a career in real estate at tampaschool.com.
Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching.
You are watching
Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm John Kurtzman. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Kurtzman. This show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. If you like learning about comparables, you'd probably like real estate. I would say you should consider a career in real estate if you don't already have your real estate license. Give us a call. The phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. We'll walk you through the step-by-step process of what it takes to get your real estate license in Florida and start a real estate career. Also, check us out online at tampaschool.com. You can find all kinds of resources and information, including our Success Center, on that website. Make sure you check out our Success Center. You can go directly to that at tampaschool.com/success. A lot of good tools in there to help you plan for your success with your real estate career. But let's get back into comparables. So we walked through the basics of this here. What a comparable is. This is a comparable sale, or the comp as they usually refer to them. And what we're doing, we're trying to find the value of a subject property. We're trying to find the value of some property. We call that property our subject. We assume that we don't know what the value is of the property, and we go through this approach to find out what the value is. And that's going to be important as we get into the whole adjustment process. But like we were talking about, there's not identical properties out there. Even when the properties seem like they're very similar, there's going to be details that do make them different. Things that make it where, for example, the one property having a pool and another property not having a pool. That's a pretty major difference. It's going to affect the property value anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 in most cases, also depending on the pool. So let's oversimplify this a little bit and get to understand what it is that we do with these comparables. Because you just don't look at what the other home sold for and use that as an indication of what your home will sell for. You're going to end up with something totally wrong. Or at least you'll know, okay, I know my house won't sell for this much because that's what it has the pool. That's great, but we don't say, well, we don't list a property and say, oh, well, offer us less than $350,000 because that's what the home with the pool is going for. No, you have to come up with a price that you want to list the property for. And this is important for pricing out the property from the get-go, is you want to be close or maybe a little bit below that market value. Because when you're close or maybe a little bit below the market value, that's where people are going to be most interested. If they see you're way above market value, they'll say, oh, this home's overpriced. This is some seller that's delusional. We don't even want to waste our time with them. But when you price it close to the market value and maybe a little bit below, that's where you start maybe getting a bidding war of multiple buyers interested in the property. But you have to understand the value in order to make that all happen. So let's oversimplify this a little bit with the adjustment process for what it is that you have to do. So let's say we've got a little bit of a number line here. We've got high dollar amounts up here and low dollar amounts down here. And let's say our subject property, we'll put the subject property in blue. We know it's not the most expensive home in the neighborhood, but we also know it's not the cheapest home in the neighborhood either. So we know that we're somewhere right along here. What this dollar amount is, we don't know. We just know it's not the most expensive. We know it's not the least expensive. So that's our subject. We're trying to find the value of that subject. So what we're going to do is take a look at the other sales in the neighborhood. And we might see, oh, there's this nice house that sold for, let's say, $400,000. And then let's also say that there's another comparable, and ours is better than this house, so we'll put it down here somewhere. And remember, we don't have any official numbers here. We're just kind of placing these on here. This is really just a visual guide to help you understand what we're doing with adjustments. So we know that this house that isn't as nice, this one sold for $200,000. And now, once we get more in depth with this, there's going to be multiple adjustments it is that you have to make about multiple items. But let's just assume there's only one thing that's different across these properties. Let's say that this home is 3 bedrooms. This home, the $400,000 comparable, is 4 bedrooms. And then let's say this $200,000 home is 2 bedrooms. So based on this, what would be the value of that subject property? Well, your mind's probably already telling you, it's probably shouting out $300,000. And you'd be right, based on this basic info that we have here, based on this very simple scenario. And now what it is that we're doing, basically, 2 things. So for this first comparable up here, comparable number 1, this home, it's 4 bedrooms and it's sold for $400,000. Now, I like to use these numbers here because it helps you understand what it is that we're doing, but typically the value of a bedroom isn't $100,000. So this is a little bit skewed here. You won't necessarily see the numbers look this nice and clean and easy in the real world, but if you understand what it is that we're doing here, we're bringing this down, we're bringing this one up, you're going to be able to do this with much more complex numbers that we're going to get into. So what we're doing with this first comparable is bringing the value down. We're subtracting 1 bedroom. And that's going to make us the value of 3 bedrooms. But we obviously know, okay, we subtract 1 bedroom and now it's similar. Now we need to put the value of that bedroom in there. And in this case here, the value of a bedroom would be $100,000. So $100,000 would be the value of that extra bedroom. So we take that $400,000 price it is that this home sold for. Because that's great for a 4-bedroom home. If you're trying to find the value of a 4-bedroom home, you don't need to do any adjustments. But we're trying to find the value of a 3-bedroom home, not a 4-bedroom home. So we subtract out that $100,000, and then the value of the 3-bedroom home based on this comparable would be $300,000. So we're subtracting there. And ultimately, on this side, we're going to do something very similar, but we're going to do the opposite. Because this home that sold for $200,000 is 2 bedrooms. So what we're going to be doing here, we're not subtracting, we're now adding in the value of a bedroom. This one had 2 bedrooms, we're going to add 1 more bedroom, and we're going to end up with the equivalent of 3 bedrooms. So when we add now, again, we're going to use that same value, that same $100,000. We're going to add that to our $200,000, and that's going to end up, again, giving us a $300,000 comparable sale price, adjusted comparable sale price. So again, to walk through what it is that we did here, we had the 4-bedroom home. 4 bedrooms, we subtracted the value of a bedroom of $100,000, and that says if comparable number 1, number these so we could reference them, if comparable number 1 were a 3-bedroom home, it would have sold for $300,000 instead of $400,000. And that's what we're concerned with, the 3-bedroom home. So that's the math we need to do. And now we've got one comparable that's saying, okay, this home is probably worth about $300,000. But now, the more comparables it is that you could utilize, especially when they start coming up with the same value like we just did here, the better it is that your estimation of value is going to be. It would be pretty rock solid in this scenario given this data and this information, because now we have this $200,000 home, adding in the $100,000 for the value of the bedroom, and now it's $300,000 as well. So now we have 2 adjusted comparables that are telling us our subject property is worth $300,000. And that's overall what it is that we're doing with the adjustment process. But now, with this adjustment process, and there's a little tip here. And you might remember taking this in the pre-licensing class. You've got CBS and then CIA. So CBS, when I say CBS, you might think of the Grammys. I'm pretty sure the Grammys were airing on CBS. I'm referring to the television station. But CBS here, when it deals with adjustments, is going to tell you comparable, better, subtract. Anytime the comparable property is better than our subject property, we're going to subtract. Comparable, better, subtract. Again, anytime the comparable is better, we subtract what makes it better. It was better because it had the extra bedroom, so we subtracted out that extra bedroom. And then down here, for this inferior comparable, we've got CIA, like the Central Intelligence Agency. And what we're doing with this comparable, we're not subtracting like we did here. That's when our comparable's better. When our comparable's inferior, we're going to add. So that stands for comparable, inferior, add, or Central Intelligence Agency, depending on what you're talking about. But here, it'll help you remember CIA, like the Central Intelligence Agency, comparable, inferior, add. Our comparable goes up in value. We're adding in the value of the bedroom. The home we're trying to find the value for isn't 2 bedrooms, it's 3 bedrooms, so we have to add in that $100,000 for the value of that bedroom. And then based on that math, our subject property is estimated to be $300,000. But this is an oversimplification. Bedrooms aren't worth $100,000 even, and you won't always have it pan out this nicely. But if you remember these two concepts, comparable inferior add and comparable better subtract, you could come up with the most different properties and do some adjustments and come up with a value. Now, the best way to use this is when the properties are similar. And usually the best indicators for similar, we'll come back to this adjustment in just a second, and we'll do some adjustments off of multiple things. But let's say we've got our little neighborhood here. And let's just make a little bit of a map, a grid map. Let's say that this is our subject property. We've got a comparable here, a comparable here, a comparable here. And then we start getting a little further out. We got a comparable here, a comparable over here, a comparable here. And let's say we go another one close in, so a comparable here. So when you're looking at the map, imagine there's a map laid out underneath my little dots that I've drawn on the screen here. When you're looking in the MLS or you're looking on whatever map it is that you're finding these comparable sales, you want to stay close to the epicenter, close to our subject property. These properties that are further out, we're probably just going to ignore them and throw them out. The reason why is because when you get in a different neighborhood, the value of property can change dramatically. Even if this property is similar, if this is a different neighborhood, that's not the best indicator of value. And especially in a situation like this where we have 4 different properties within the same neighborhood that are recent sales, we don't have to worry about going outside of our neighborhood. So that's rule number 1 when you're using comparables, is you want to stay close to the subject property. That's rule number 1. Stay close to the subject property, preferably within the same neighborhood. If you're in a suburban area, like for instance New Tampa, New Tampa is a really great example of areas where there's neighborhoods that are very closed off, a lot of gated communities, and when you're doing a estimation of value in a neighborhood like that, you want to stay within that gate. You get outside that gate, now you're dealing with properties that may or may not be good indications of value of the property. So we can just throw these out. We get rid of these properties that are outside of our property lines. The other thing, rule number 2 that you want to look for when you're using comparables, rule number 1 is stay close to your subject, preferably stay in the same neighborhood. Rule number 2 is try to stay within the last 6 months. Now, this rule you could be a little less strict on. If you need to go further back in time, and that's why this is rule number 2, if let's say that the only one of these properties here that sold 6 months ago was this one, and now we only have one comparable in this neighborhood. that doesn't do us a whole lot of good. It doesn't give us a whole lot of confirmation and confidence in our estimation of value if we only have one recent sale close to our property, one within the last 6 months. But you could break this rule. Break rule number 2 before you break rule number 1. Let's stay in the same neighborhood because that's rule number 1. We stay in the same neighborhood, but now we could break rule number 2 and go a little bit further back in time. So let's say that one's 6 months. Let's say that this one is 14 months out. This one was 18 months ago. And let's say that this one was 19 months ago. So you could break the rule of time. You want to try to stay within the last 6 months, and let's actually make one of these a little bit sooner. Let's say that one of these was 9 months ago. Let's call them 9 months instead of 19 months. It's okay to go further back in time if you stay within the same neighborhood. Now, there is a way to make an adjustment based on the time. We're going to talk about that as well. Just like we made adjustments for the number of bedrooms, we can make adjustments for the date it was that the property sold. Because maybe 18 months ago, our furthest back comparable here, maybe the market was completely different 18 months ago. Maybe the market has gone up 5-10% over the last 18 months. So when I say 5 or 10%, if we come up with an exact number, let's say the market has gone up, overall prices have gone up by 7.5% over the last 18 months, that just tells us we need to make a 7.5% adjustment. And we'll go through and do some of those with the adjustments that we're going to be working with. But those are the 2 rules that I want to emphasize when you're doing this, especially when you're doing this in the real world and you're actually trying to find the value of a property. Rule number 1, stay in the same neighborhood. You get outside the neighborhood, and now these are not always the best indicator of value because they're in a completely different neighborhood. Rule number 2 is try to stay within the last 6 months. Preferably, the sooner the better. If you've got 3 properties that just sold in the last month, that's even better. The more recent, the better. And you might actually even need to make an adjustment based on a property that sold 6 months ago. So that might require an adjustment as well. It depends on how much the market has changed, but the sooner, the more recent these sales are, the better indication of value it is that you're going to have. Now, the more it is that you have to do those adjustments that we talked about, the more likely there's going to be some human error in your value it is that you're coming up with. But when you have properties, so let's say rather than 6 months, 14 months, 18 months, and 9 months, let's say that these properties sold 1 month, 2 months, and 3 months out. Now, all of a sudden, this is our worst indicator of value because these are much more recent sales. So you want to try to tack onto the recent sales. Stay within the neighborhood, number 1. So look what you've got within the neighborhood and then start adding in. If there's a property that had sold 18 months ago and we've got these 4 that are more recent, pick the ones that are more recent. Rule number 1, stay in the same neighborhood. Rule number 2, try to find recent sales. And now rule number 3, and this is going to be if, let's say, we're dealing in a neighborhood that's very diverse in the properties. Very diverse in the properties, meaning that, like that example we were going through, having 2-bedroom homes in the same neighborhood as 4-bedroom homes would be a fairly diverse neighborhood. Now, if we're trying to find the value of the 3-bedroom home, that's where we, maybe look at some of these 2-bedroom homes and go off of that stuff. But if we're trying to find the value of a 4-bedroom home, that's where maybe you want to ignore those 2-bedroom homes, if you can. If you've got enough data that doesn't factor in those 2-bedroom homes. Or let's say there's a little bit of a river going through here. Let's say the Hillsborough River runs through this neighborhood. We might want to ignore any properties that are on the river because our property is not on the river. So a lot of things like that you have to keep in mind. Overall, you want to, the one thing that will help sum up all of these additional little rules basically, so you don't have to remember, okay, well, if it's near water, then we can't use that, or if we do this, then we can't do that. The thing you want to remember, aside from stay within the same neighborhood and stay in recent times, is you're looking for properties that are comparable. And when a property isn't comparable, you could eliminate it. You could throw it out. Because that comparable, yeah, this one will say the property is worth a lot more, but the reason why this property is worth so much more is because it's on the water. So if this property is not on the water, you don't want to use properties on the water for indications of value. So you want to look in here, and again, now you might have to go a little bit further back in time. So this is a constant check and balance kind of process that you're going through here, finding this. So let's say, okay, now we need to stay really in this area because we don't want to deal with these properties in the water, and this one maybe sold 11 months ago, and this one maybe sold 13 months ago. So now we've got some better reference points rather than these properties that are going to skew our data. These would be called outliers, and we could just throw those out. We don't have to look at them because they're not good indicators of value. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but then we're going to get back into the numbers doing some of these adjustments. So stick with us. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com. Does your current career allow for unlimited income potential? With a career in real estate, the sky is the limit. What you put in is what you get out. Find out more about how you can tap into the unlimited income potential of a career in real estate at tampaschool.com.
Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching.
You are watching
Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Chrismo, and the show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. If you're interested in starting or enhancing your real estate career, make sure you give us a call. The phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. You can also find a lot more information online at tampaschool.com. Again, that's tampaschool.com, including our Success Center, where we help you plan for your success. Have a lot of great tools, including the recording of today's episode. So if you missed any part of this and you want to rewatch it, definitely check that out. Again, it's tampaschool.com/success. Before we get back into this, I want to give a shout out to Michael Colini over on Facebook, commenting in saying he's enjoying the episode on comps, and yes, that this is what needs to be taught. This is something that you learn in your pre-licensing course, maybe not as in-depth as it is that we're going over this today, or as real world as we're making some of this stuff here. But this is so essential, not only to passing your exam, but also when you're practicing real estate for knowing what the value of a property is. We've come kind of lazy as a society and reliant on the computers when the computers aren't 100% accurate, and sometimes very far from 100% accurate with coming up with comparable property values. But now let's deal with the problem when our comparables are not always one better or one inferior. Because if you remember that chart that we had up here just a second ago, where if the property's better, we subtract, if the property's inferior, we add. And we just make those adjustments that way. If it's better, bring it down. If it's inferior, bring it up. So that way everything's similar to our subject property. But now the problem lies in, let's say that we have our subject property has, let's say, 3 bedrooms in a pool. So that's the one we're trying to find the value for. We don't know what the value is on the subject property, but we do know it has 3 bedrooms in a pool. So we start pulling comparables, and we look at this first comparable. And for comparable 1, let's say it has 4 bedrooms, but it does not have a pool. And let's say we've got another comparable here as well, comparable 2. And let's say that comparable 2 has 3 bedrooms as well, but also does not have a pool. And let's just do one more comparable or add it here, because I think I've got a little bit more room to squeeze one more in. And let's say comparable 3 is 5 bedrooms, and it does have a pool. So we've got our subject property that we're trying to find the value for. And we're going to use these 3 recent sales to estimate the value. And now we're just dealing with these 2 attributes. In the real world, not only will you have to do this on the bedrooms, but whether or not it has a pool, but also the size of the garage. You might have to do it for the landscaping. If one property is much better landscaping than another, there you have to make an adjustment on it as well. If, let's say, it's more updated, let's say there's stainless steel appliances in it rather than white appliances or old appliances that are outdated or something along those lines. Or maybe this one has granite counters whereas the other has laminate counters. These are all these things that make it different are all different attributes it is that you're going to adjust based on. And it's really anything that contributes to the value of the property. So we're doing this here just off of the number of bedrooms and whether or not it has a pool. Still a little bit of an oversimplification here because we're assuming these properties are identical other than just the number of bedrooms and whether or not it is they have a pool. But let's say that the pool is worth, let's say $15,000, and the bedroom is worth, let's say $10,000. So we've got 3 properties here. Now let's look at what the differences are. So this one we have the difference in bedrooms, so we will have to do something with the $10,000. Whether we're adding or subtracting, we're going to get to in just a second. For the pool, we also have a difference here, so we will have to do something with the $15,000. For the second comparable, we've got the same number of bedrooms, so we could leave that one blank. We don't need to adjust based on the bedrooms, but we will have to make an adjustment because this one doesn't have a pool, whereas this one does have a pool. So we will have to adjust based on that $15,000. And then finally, our last comparable, we've got no difference in the pool. They both have pools, but again, we've got a difference in the bedrooms. And really, all the ones that we're going to be doing the math on is everything below here. This is our reference data up top here, what our subject property is, and then what each of these different elements are. 1 bedroom is worth $10,000, and the pool is worth $15,000. Now we need to figure out whether we need to add or subtract. And to help you remember that, you want to again remember CBS, comparable, better, subtract, and CIA, comparable, inferior, add. So let's start off with comparable 1 here. The number of bedrooms compared to the subject property, the 4 bedrooms is better than 3 bedrooms. Bigger is always better. That's the basic assumption with this. So the 4 bedrooms is better than our 3 bedroom, so we're going to subtract for this one. But now with the pool, which property is better? Based on the pool, our subject property is better. But we don't care if the subject property is better or worse. We care about whether the comparable is better or worse. And based on the pool, not having a pool, this makes our comparable inferior. And you want to remember CIA, comparable, inferior, add. So we'll be adding the $15,000 there. And let's finish up with this one first here. Let's now tally these up and come up with what our total adjustment is. If we're subtracting $10,000 but adding $15,000, what we're doing really is adding $5,000. We're adding $5,000 for comparable 1. Now comparable 2, it's identical in the size of the bedrooms, but this one does not have a pool. So this property would have sold for $15,000 more. So that's our adjustment there. And we don't have to tally this up at all because there's only one adjustment. If a property is very similar to your property, except for there's maybe one thing, like this one has a pool, that one doesn't have a pool, we just adjust based on the pool, and that's it. We don't have to come up with a total adjustment because we're not adjusting based on anything else because the number of bedrooms are the same. If it's the same, we don't need to make an adjustment. If comparable 2 did have a pool, we wouldn't need to do anything. we wouldn't even need to add that $15,000. We're adding the $15,000 because this property does not have a pool. So we need to figure out, okay, what would comparable 2 sell for if it did have a pool? And that's about $15,000 more. Now with comparable 3, again, we're not adjusting based on the pool, but now we're adjusting on the bedrooms. And comparable 3 has 5 bedrooms, whereas our subject has 3 bedrooms. So that makes our comparable better. And you want to remember, when we're comparables better, we're subtracting. Now these are all independent, different problems that we're solving here that we're going to be combining together basically in the end. These are all separate from each other. Now what you'll also find as you go through and do this comparable analysis is you'll see the sale price of the comparable. So let's say the sale price of this first comparable was $295,000. And so what we're going to do is take that $5,000 and we're going to add, since we're adding $5,000, we're adding $5,000 to this comparable, and that gives us an adjusted value. That's called adjusted value of $300,000. So based on comparable 1 alone, it says that even though comparable 1 did sell for $295,000, if comparable 1 were more identical to our property, it would have sold for $300,000. That's our adjusted value. Now we're going to find an adjusted value for comparable number 2. There's a little bit more room here. And let's say with comparable 2, the sale price was let's say $275,000. So our sale price was $275,000. That's what it sold for, but again, we want the adjusted value because that's the indicator of what the value of our property is going to be. And so what we're going to do now is bring that over, that $15,000 that we're adding, so we're adding $15,000. And then when we add $15,000 to $275,000, we end up with an adjusted value of $290,000. And let's say for this third comparable, so we've got 2 different adjusted values now, which you see they are different, which they will be. We've got our third comparable, and let's say the sale price of this third comparable was $305,000. So now what we're going to do is again take over our adjustment. We're subtracting the $10,000 for that bedroom. And again, this is where you want to look at this and say, okay, well, that property has the pool. Yeah, it's got the extra bedroom, but other than that, it's similar to our property. So we should be able to sell for $305,000 because that one sold for $305,000, right? Wrong, because we have to subtract the value of that bedroom. We subtract out that $10,000 for the added value of that bedroom that this comparable had. So when we subtract that out, we end up with $295,000 of adjusted value. So overall, after doing this comparison here, we see that we've got a low end of $290,000 and a high end of $300,000. That really helps tighten things up compared to, okay, this one was $275, so $275 to $305. We've narrowed that down, okay, to $290 to $300. And you could even take this one further by coming up with a weighted average of all 3 of these values here. You could find a basic average of those 3 values. You'll end up with $295,000. Or if you want to weight some of these values accordingly, you could do that. It's called reconciliation, and basically you're just coming up with a weighted average. So if we took these 3 values, got rid of everything else here, and we're just dealing with the 3 values of the 3 different comparables, So we take our three adjusted values, and what we do is we say, okay, well, comparable 1, we're really going to stick that in third place. We're going to put that in third place because we had to make 2 different adjustments on the property. And then let's say for comparable number 2, we'll leave that one as number 2 because we did have to make a pretty major adjustment in $15,000. But, overall, it's still pretty similar. And then we'll make this one, number 3, actually number 1. We're assigning priority here, basically. And what we're going to do is come up with basically a pie chart. A little bit of a pie chart. And if you imagine the pie chart of being 100%, let's say that we want to give 50% of our value to comparable 1. And then let's say that we're going to give 30% of the value to comparable 2. And then the remaining 20% of value, we're going to divvy up to comparable 3. Now, you can assign whatever numbers it is that you seem fitting for your scenario. And you want to base it off of what properties are most similar to our subject property and which properties are least similar to our subject property. So that way, in case there's human error due to your adjustments, you're accounting for that human error and you're trying to weed it out a little bit by assigning a lower percentage of value here. And this is going to help us come up with $1 amount rather than just the range here to give us a dollar amount of what that estimated market value may be for the property. So let's bring these a little bit closer together. We've got our 3 different properties. The one that we're going to get the most weight for, that one was $295,000. For comparable number 2, which we're going to kind of throw in the middle of the mix here, we're giving that one 30% of value. That one was $290,000. And then for comparable 3, we're going to put that one, because that one came out to be $300,000, and we're putting that one at 20%. So all we're going to do basically is multiply by the percentages. We're going to take $295,000 times 50%. And then this one here, $290,000, that was comparable 2. We're going to multiply that by 30%. And then finally, comparable 3, we're giving that one 20% weight. Now, if we add these up, 50 plus 30 plus 20, they add up to 100%. And that's the way you always have to make sure that they add up to 100%. Otherwise, your math isn't going to quite work out for this here. But as long as they add up to 100%, you do whatever it is that you seem fitting. If you want to put 60% here, 30% here, and 10% there, that still adds up to 100%. 60 plus 30 plus 10 is still 100%. You could do that. You could do 98% and then 1 and 1% if you think that's appropriate there. And you want to try to avoid extremes like that. But if that's appropriate, if you say, oh, well, we basically don't even want to look at these values at all, we're only using this one here, you could do that. That's going to usually skew your data when you start doing extreme things like that, because you can see here, yes, there are differences. It doesn't seem like much, 50, 30, 20, but this will make a difference and influence what value it is we come up with. And it should not be $295,000. Let's do the math and find out what these come up to be. So if we take this $295,000, so $295,000, you're going to multiply that by 50%, 0.50 if you're going to put that on your calculator, and we get $147,500. So that's a reconciled value of this, but reconciled values don't mean anything until you add all of your reconciled values together. We're going to come up with the second one, $290,000 times 30%. And we get $87,000. And then finally, $300,000 times 20%, we end up with $60,000. And then finally, what we're doing last is we're going to add these 3 together. So $147,500 plus $87,000 plus $67,000. And we end up with pretty close to 295, but it is a slightly different number. A total reconciled adjusted value of our subject property of $294,500. And now let's think about for a second what these numbers are telling us. Only got a couple minutes left here. What these numbers are telling us basically, this is our range, 290 to 300,000. If we're within that range, we're pretty close to market value. It's only a $10,000 differential. It's only $10,000 that we have the span over here. So we're already pretty close to market value anywhere in there. Our three values that we came up with were 290, 295, and 300. Just coming up with a basic average of these, 295 plus 290 plus 300, dividing them out, you'll end up with $295,000. But now, when we come up with this reconciled value, we put a little bit more emphasis on the $295,000 and the least amount of emphasis on the $300,000. And what that does is that pushes the value down a little bit. And why we're doing this, the reason why we're doing that is we're saying, well, you know, that $300,000 house, that just seemed nicer. We adjusted for the values here, but that's really the least like our property. This one's the most like our property, and this one's still pretty close to what our property is. And so when we do that, it comes up with $294,500. And that's maybe, okay, this is what we should put this at. And you still have to take into account, if let's say we're listing a property, you have to take into account the competition. It's not the comps, but the competition, what the other homes are selling for in the neighborhood to make sure you're pricing this appropriately. But the market value, what it'll probably sell for based on this reconciled value of these comps, would be $294,500. So that's understanding the value. Now, whether you price it a little below this market value to make it more competitive, or maybe you're trying to hold out for more and you price it above the market value. Your job here was to find what that market value is so you know, okay, this is our reference point. So now we have an actual number to actually deal with and hopefully come close to what that property would actually appraise for by an actual appraiser. But that's our sales comparison approach. The key thing you want to keep in mind here is not all properties are identical. You will have to make adjustments. You will have to make changes and either decrease values or increase values based on the differences in the property. And that's important to know for your exam, and it's extremely important to know in the real world as well, because a big part of our job as a realtor, as a real estate professional, as a broker, as a sales associate, is to understand property value. Understand the value. Not just say what the value is, but understand what that value means, why that value is the way it is, and be able to communicate that effectively with our clients. So that's the sales comparison approach. Hope you guys have found some information that's going to maybe help you with your exams, or maybe help you get a better understanding of what you're doing when you're talking about value in the real world, and maybe why the Zestimates and the Zillow estimates and all these different automated price methods online come up with the numbers it is that they do, because this is essentially what it is that they're doing. And the basic information we're going off of, like the bedrooms and the pool, that's as well as bathrooms and square footage and things like that. The basic information you can find in the public records is what these automated valuation models use. But it's your job to take into account the things it is that you see in the property. Okay, this property has a really nice open floor plan, whereas the other one feels really closed in. That's going to be a difference of maybe $10,000, and you're making these, you're putting that into the mix there, and now you're able to come up with a little bit better indicator of value. Or maybe that the carpets inside are terrible, they smell like dog and they need to be completely torn out and they're all stained and replaced. So that's something that's going to take a hit on the value of the property. So you do the math to help make sense a little bit of your thinking and your thoughts, because appraising property is more of an art than a science. This is the science behind it. This is the math behind it. This is the actual calculation part of this. But now it's our interpretation of this is, okay, should we be closer to here? Should we be closer to here? The numbers say this is where market value is, what it'll probably sell for, but you know, we probably need to go down a little bit if we're trying to sell this property because it's not in the best of condition. So a lot of little things like that you're able to see in person that completely changes what these computers might come up with. So this is an essential skill, even though we have so much technology that's available. Now, in the MLS system, it's actually got a whole system in there for making adjustments and working with this, where the computer does do still the math for you, but it allows you to be the one inputting what it is to do with each piece of information. So that's our sales comparison approach. Again, thank you guys for tuning in today. Thank you for subscribing, liking our channels. We recently went over 500 subscribers on YouTube, so thank you for that. I think we've got like 10,000 likers on Facebook too, so thank you for that as well. remember to check out our Success Center because there's a lot of great information on Facebook and YouTube, but our Success Center is the place to go for all this information. Again, that's tampaschool.com/success. There's a lot of great videos in there, all the episodes of Ask the Instructor, as well as State of Real Estate, some articles to help you out, some calculators to help you out in there, all kinds of things to help you plan for your success in real estate. And again, if you're looking to start a real estate career, give us a call. We've got all kinds of tools to help you do that. We've got the courses you need to help you do that, and we could walk you through step by step what it takes to get your Florida real estate license. So again, give us a call. Our phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you Friday for State of Real Estate.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com. Does your current career allow for unlimited income potential? With a career in real estate, the sky is the limit. What you put in is what you get out. Find out more about how you can tap into the unlimited income potential of a career in real estate at tampaschool.com.
Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching.
You are watching
Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor.